Hi, everybody. I genuinely and sincerely believe that if you want to break an impasse, if you want to counter extreme polarization, if you want to get a deeper understanding, and if you perhaps want to forge real connections, you've got to keep talking. So here I am, and today my guest is Anuradha Bhasin. She's the executive editor of Kashmir Times, one of the oldest newspapers in Kashmir, and today a digital news media outlet which serves the state and people outside it very, very comprehensively. She's also the author of a book called A Dismantled State, the untold story of Kashmir after 370. And today, I'm hoping that Anuradha will give us a perspective on how Kashmiris are seeing the way forward from the Supreme Court verdict, the landmark verdict that's come in that upholds the Indian government's decision to abrogate 370 and Article 35, and that has had far-reaching consequences for the special status and the safeguards that Jammu and Kashmir was provided with. It has also changed the very nature of the state. It is no longer a state. It's been carved up, as you know, into two separate union territories, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. And it doesn't have an elected government, or a state government, or a legislature. So, Anuradha, thank you very much for joining me. And
thank you for inviting me here.
And let's start with the Dil Ka Hal of Kashmiri people, because, there's been so much reaction to this verdict, a lot of legal analysis, a lot of commentary. But what is it that people are feeling, and what is it that you are picking up?
It's very difficult to, just give you in a nutshell or in a capsule
Sure.
what people are feeling, because Kashmir is not a homogene. When we say Kashmir, it sometimes means just the Kashmir Valley. But when we are talking about Article 370, that has impacted the entire region. So we also mean Jammu and Kashmir as it existed
Mm.
before 2019, which means areas of Ladakh, it means Jammu region, which is diverse itself, and within Kashmir. And apart from these ethnic linguistic differences, there are also people with different political ideologies. But I'll try my best to see how I can say. I think overall there is a disappointment.
Mm.
Overall, an overwhelming disappointment. Though there is silence, there are no protests. But people in Jammu, for instance, have felt, initially some of them celebrated the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, and gradually they started realizing that they were losing protections, their special privileges with respect to land and jobs, with respect to businesses. The same for Ladakh, and also people resented their demoted status from a state into two union territories, dismembered into two union territories, which are directly controlled by Delhi. Now, of course, people in Ladakh, eh, at least the Buddhists in Leh, had been demanding a union territory for a
Yes.
long time.
Mm.
But when it's come, they've realized the baggage that it has come with. And since the safeguards do not exist, they feel that there is threat to not just their jobs and their land and businesses, but it can also be an ecological threat. And as far as Kashmir is concerned, because its politics has been peculiar because of the anxieties and insecurities of the people and the excessive trust deficit, which also pilfers down to the Muslim majority areas of Jammu region and Ladakh region.
Mm.
So there were these anxieties which have been played up ever since Article
Mm.
370 was watered down. And there are definitely disappointments,
Mm.
if not anger and despair, but in some areas there would be.
But there is also another narrative that's coming through, and that is coming through in a lot of mainstream media that is being articulated by Kashmiris from the valley, where they seem to have fully embraced what the BJP and the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, have articulated as the vision for a new Kashmir, as a chance, as this abrogation of 370 and what happened in August 2019, as a chance to break away from this very politicized, fractious kind of history that Jammu and Kashmir has. What do you make of those? Because, you know, when you're sitting in Mumbai like I am, and there are people all over this country, very far from Kashmir and from the ground there, and when they look at this mainstream narrative and mainstream media bringing you voices from the state, which actually supports what is going on, where do you place that, and what do you make of it?
You know, in every regime, you have people who will side with the state.
Sure.
The problem right now is that you are only hearing those voices that are pro-state. And the other voices have been completely dwarfed, completely silenced under military jackboots, under excessive militarization, under a new kind of unannounced censorship, which exercises itself through imposition of fear with repetitive uh, uh, methods of, terrorizing people, intimidating people through raids, through detentions, through confiscation of electronic devices, through attachment of properties, through loss of jobs, and so on and so forth. And that keeps happening repetitively. So gradually we've seen the silencing of not just the common people, but also, I would say three main entities that are the main voices of the people that become the voice of the people, the political voices, the civil society, the media, and primarily the media. So the only media that is functioning vibrantly in Kashmir and even in India um, today will bring the voices only of the people who are articulating in favor of the BJP government. So those are the voices you only hear. And for any person who is not familiar with Kashmir, there is a general tendency to believe what they are being shown.
Mm. So, how do we get to understand what is the real voice of the people on the ground? Elections?
Elections is one of them, but restoration of democracy, unfortunately, when it comes to Kashmir, has always been, and this is much before the present BJP government was in power, was to a tendency to see elections as the only yardstick of democracy. While that's an important yardstick, an important measure of democracy, but there are other things that are important, particularly whether the civil society is free to speak, whether there is room for democratic dissent, whether there is space for democratic and peaceful demonstrations. All of these are important elements in a democracy, and that is not existing at the moment. As far as I said, earlier, elections were the only measure of democracy. Today, we haven't had elections since 2014.
Yeah.
So elections have been due since 2018, but they're not happening. The local bodies polls were recently postponed, and there apparently seems no reason why they should not be going ahead with these elections.
So, given that a lot has happened in the past 4.5 years, including a delimitation exercise, the Block Development Council elections, I'm not sure what those are exactly in the context of, Panchayati Raj. You'll have to explain that for me. But given that context, given that in this verdict, the Supreme Court has directed or asked the Election Commission to ensure or to to move towards elections in September 2024. Why is it that we are not already having elections? What is your reading of what's going on, given that electoral roll revisions have also taken place and there seems to be operational groundwork that has happened?
Yeah, definitely. We have a three-tier system of with assembly elections, and then the municipal elections and the panchayat elections. And over and above these, the district development elections was another tier that was added at a time when no other bodies were actually functioning. No other political, at any other political, the tiers, politics was working. And even those elections were in the BJP, apart from some pockets in the Hindu majority pockets in Jammu region, where they had a good performance. In rest of the areas, they did not electorally. But it is later that they manipulated and they tried to, buy over the members to their side. The typical horse trading that you see, which is part of the Indian political system and has been, and more so now, that did happen. But they did not have any powers. Now, what the DDC have been doing in the last 3 years, I don't think anybody on the ground really knows. As far as, I mean, the assembly elections are the most important, and they have been delayed for a very long time. The Delimitation Commission was created in 2020, and the government went out of the way to announce the Delimitation Commission for Jammu and Kashmir, even though there was a nationwide freeze till 2026. So in this part of the country, which is supposedly now more integrated than any other part of the country, it was singled out, and a delimitation commission was formed where the exercise, I mean, in 2 years, they took about 2 years to finalize their reports and submitted it, which becomes the final word on how
and
the constituent
representation of
boundaries are
population
going to be.
via.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of gerrymandering of boundaries without taking the basic consideration of population into consideration. They've taken area, they've taken border area. Somewhere there is no criteria applied because places and areas that are not geographically and culturally contiguous or have been brought together, or those that were have been separated. So it made little sense other than, whatever the few, some of the people who studied some of these constituencies, there is a feeling that this is done only to suit the BJP, to strengthen and consolidate the Hindu vote bank, and to divide the homogeneity of the Muslim vote bank. Other than that,
Mala fide intent, you clearly believe that it's mala fide intent.
Several political parties, in fact, all political parties other than the BJP, have criticized it and have specifically said that this is going to suit only the BJP.
So,
So there
Anuradha, you're
is,
saying the political landscape on the ground in terms of electoral politics is completely changed. And how are political parties then navigating this? Because after August 2019 and the abrogation, we've heard and read about how all the non-BJP parties came together, and the Gupkar declaration and the alliance that came out as a result of that to fight for against what had happened. How politically, if there is such a complete overhaul of the electoral map, are political parties going to be ready? And while all political parties and their leaders have spoken in reaction to the Supreme Court's verdict, there hasn't been a joint statement yet from the Gupkar alliance, isn't it? So what is happening there? Because at some point, it seems to me, and I'm really not an expert, but it is only due via elections that there will be any change of circumstances if those elections are held.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if these parties need to beat the BJP, they may need to be united. But what seems to have happened ever since the Gupkar alliance came into being, and it actually came into being a day before the abrogation on August 4th,
Mm-hmm.
2019. Ever since, at that time there were several parties, I've forgotten the exact count, but
It
maybe
was
about a
historic,
dozen.
isn't it? What
Yeah, it
happened there
was
was historic.
historic.
Yeah.
All these parties that had traditionally been foes, they came together, and parties that had even been friendly with the BJP, they also they were part of the Gupkar alliance because
Mm.
there was common anxiety, there were common concerns, and they came together. But gradually, there many of the parties have since left the Gupkar alliance, and it's primarily now just I think National Conference, People's Democratic
Yeah.
Party,
Yeah.
Congress is not sure where which side it is
But
on,
those
whether it
National
is part of
Conference
it
and
or not
PDP
part.
are still the two biggest, largest parties, right? They've formed governments. They've been part
Yes,
of governments in
yes.
Kashmir. So, but you're saying that it's not clear whether they will be together and fight elections together, and so therefore this elections and the changed political landscape, it's all very fluid, and it's not clear what things are on the ground. Is that
Yeah, in
what
fact,
I?
much worse, after the court verdict. Yeah, like earlier, yeah, they were still talking about, they could talk about restoration of Article 370. Now, the problem for them is what would be their negotiating
Unifying, yeah.
point? Yeah, no, the what would be the mandate they would take to the people? What are they going to offer to the people after 370 verdict? That is another challenge that it would be very difficult for them to navigate apart from getting,
Mm.
coming together to beat BJP.
So what happens next? What is the way forward? Because I remember in the immediate aftermath of August 2019 and the decision announced in the Indian Parliament, people in Kashmir endured a terrible hardship, and that was the internet being shut down, the increased security presence, all these political leaders under house arrest. So it was a very, very difficult time that collectively as a society, Jammu and Kashmir went through. What is the learning from there? Is there a sense that let's just get along with what is happening for most people? And I don't mean that that is the right way. There's no value judgment to that or the wrong way. But is there a sense of what is the way forward? Because, let me quote you something that I read Dr. Karan Singh say. And he says a large section of the people will be very unhappy. To them, my sincere advice is that they should accept the inevitable. They should accept the fact that this is now done. There is no point in unnecessarily hitting their head against the wall. They should turn their energy in fighting the next elections instead of any negativity. What do you make of this kind of statement to go on, to get on with it?
I don't know. I can't speak for Dr. Karan Singh, but apparently he comes from the royal family that brought the state together. Where is the state today? It should have been heartbreaking for him.
Mm.
A, of course, I mean, it's pragmatic to move on and to find new ways. How are you going to engage with the new reality? What are you going to do? I mean, even if you're going to fight back,
Mm.
what are the ways that you're going to fight back?
Mm.
It's important that these are realistic. You know what you're doing. Right now, I feel there's so much of despair in Jammu and Kashmir, and particularly in Kashmir, which has had a history of resistance. Jammu region in recent years has not had that much of a history of resistance.
Yeah.
And there is a complete silence because there is so much despair, there is so much fear, there is a sense of fatigue, there is a sense of helplessness and a sense of hopelessness.
Mm.
And I think they probably in their pragmatism, they are probably engaging with the new realities with their silence.
Mm,
It's something that it has been, I mean, in one way you can say that is probably the only option they have, but that is also probably a strategic option. But having seen Kashmir's history, there have been many ups and downs in Kashmir. There have been times when people have reconciled to the new reality. So to say, on the surface, it seems they've reconciled and
mm,
they move on.
mm,
But it has just blown back. The backlash
mm.
comes much later. It has a gestation period. It has a
Right.
long gestation period. Say, for instance, when Sheikh Abdullah was arrested in 1953, and puppet regime under Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad, his deputy, was
Mm,
imposed on Kashmiris. So there, for the next 10 years, and because Bakshi brought in development, he did, opened, constructed roads, he built hospitals, he built infrastructure. So people were also happy and engaged with that.
mm.
But 10 years later, 11 years later, in 1964, when the Hazrat Bal, the Mu'e
Yeah.
Muqaddas crisis, when the holy relic was
Yeah.
stolen and then
Mm,
suddenly recovered, there was outrage in the valley
mm,
over that. So somewhere, the feelings are pent up
mm.
and they will come out.
So you're
And
saying
today
that.
we are talking about, and that is 60s,
Huh.
and we are talking about a time when the Kashmir Valley and many parts of Jammu have witnessed terrible militancy in the last 3 decades,
Mm,
especially in the 90s. That's very, very new. The wounds are very new. And I worry that if there is will be a backlash sometime, I can't say when, but there would be.
but
I
you're
mean,
not
and that's a
ruling it out.
natural
You're pretty
process.
sure that there will
I'm
be
not,
a pent up.
I can't be sure. I can't be sure, but that is usually a natural
Mm,
consequence of a situation like this. I mean, having been let me say, just a student of history or politics. If you look the world over,
mm,
you suppress people to that level somewhere or the other. It may down the road, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it may come back. And I'm just worried what kind of a form that would take. We would be more virulent than what we saw in the 90s,
mm,
or even those that phase of which in Kashmir was called the new Intifada, the
mm,
stone
mm,
pelting phase with the
mm,
street protests.
mm.
Yeah, how potent is that going to be?
And we've not seen that for a while, isn't it? The street
Yeah,
protests, the firing at kids, the blinding with those with
yeah.
pellets.
Thankfully not. Yeah.
Yes, and that's a so would that is seen as something that is to be credited to the due to some of the decisions that have been taken in the past 4.5 years. How do you react to that? Or is that an
Um,
outcome of increased security forces and their activities? How does one see it? Because you're not,
it's
is it that we are not getting to hear and see? Is it being erased or wiped out from the public consciousness, or is it that genuinely these instances of separatist militants? Of course, you hear about encounters and you still get these reports, but it is not like the young boys protesting. It's not like the what Burhan Wani
mhm.
started off. It's none of that at this point of time, and hasn't been for a few years. Isn't that a good thing, Anuradha?
Well, if you look at, yeah, it is terrifying to deal with that amount of violence on a daily basis. But there is a violence that is very silent and invisible, which is
Mm,
going on right now.
mm, mm,
The kind of repression that is being exercised in Kashmir through a repetitive cycle of detentions, releasing them, then
Yeah.
rearresting people, scaring them by summoning them to police stations, or on various grounds, attaching people's properties, bringing out executive orders that any government employee
Yeah.
involved in some anti-national activity, and the bureaucrat or the bureaucracy decides what an anti-national act is without any explanation, will lose their jobs. And
Yeah.
they could lose their jobs, and these are the wordings of one of the orders, is that if you have a relative or a friend, even they could, who are connected with militancy, that could also make you lose your job. People cannot get their passports made. In fact, several journalists and
Yes.
some other people, their passports were revoked in the recent past. The fact that they are not even taking it up in the court, the fact that they are not even speaking out. There are journalists on a daily basis now. I mean, earlier, about 2 years ago, at least, journalists would come and say, okay, we were put on the no-fly list, or, our passports were not being, we didn't get a CID verification for the passports, or whatever was happening, whatever different ways of intimidation they were facing. Today, they're not ready to talk about it, but it is happening on a daily basis.
I mean, we are listening to the fact that they've been, I mean, Asif Sultan for 5 years, incarcerated for 5 years. And these are on, very, very powerful laws, very, very draconian laws. Has this had a chilling effect on not just media, but everybody else down the line? I mean, you
Yes,
are
definitely,
describing.
definitely,
Mm.
definitely.
Therefore,
And
does it mean that we are not
human
getting
rights activists have
here?
been arrested.
Mm.
People across the board, businessmen were arrested, academics were arrested, lawyers, I mean, who are fighting the cases of, say, journalists, or any controversial cases, they are also harassed.
Mm.
So many lawyers, like habeas corpus petitions. There were lots and lots of
Yes.
corpus petitions in
Yeah.
Kashmir. Today, nobody is ready to take them up. Very few lawyers are doing it, and at great risk.
Mm.
And these are things. And when you say, you compare, okay, that was awful. The pellet gun injuries, the blindings that happened due to pellet guns, boys coming out on the roads, and I mean, you're wasting your life and energy, and you're ready to be
With
killed.
the
It
the
is,
stone
yeah.
pelting. Yeah.
It is, yeah. I think as a society, it has a very brutalizing impact. But here you have a society which is completely now invisibilized. You've
Mm.
kind of broken their spirit.
Mm. Mm.
That is no less a tyranny. It's difficult to compare which is better and which is not, but tyranny in a new form does continue.
Anuradha, what do you make of the fact that when you look at what the government says, there is all this data about colleges open, skilling centers, women being brought to the fore, Government of India schemes, the famous Ujjwala schemes, and all of that reaching people at the grassroots, no burning of schools. Prime Minister Modi, in his column in national dailies after the Supreme Court verdict, has spelled all of this out. So, does this mean that at least materially on a day-to-day basis routine life is better, opportunities are better for the youth, for the common man? How do you see it? How should one see this?
I'm not sure, but some development was happening. It's not that the development in Jammu and Kashmir wasn't happening. And of course, it had, when he's talking about burning schools.
Yeah.
So BJP has this habit of handpicking and cherry picking certain things,
Hmm.
and without giving, a context. Now, those kind of incidents may have happened in the 90s when militancy was at its peak. That wasn't the usual
Even
scenario.
around
And
2016, 17, we did see that, isn't it?
Some of it did happen, and
Mm,
then not school buildings being burnt, but some government buildings
mm,
or some government property was burnt, and those were few cases, very aberrations. But mostly it was government vehicles that were
mm,
uh, stormed by these young boys, or police stations.
mm,
But development was happening side by side. It has been going hand in hand. Roads were being constructed, hospitals, colleges, you mentioned medical colleges, and then that's been going on for quite some time. But we need to, I won't be able to speak without data and numbers. Has it really improved? Now, if you look at the government's own data and figures, regarding certain investments, it says we've made investments, and in their own data doesn't match. They're talking about things that are still in the planning stages,
mm,
and where they feel that say about 100 crore investment would come through this project. So they're counting that as well. Um, and uh, so what is really existing on the ground, it would be very difficult to talk about that without data. But
mm,
definitely, if there are schemes, I'm sure some of them are being implemented, if not all. There will always be people who benefit.
mm,
It's not that 100% everybody is having a miserable life. I'm sure, like for instance, there is robust tourism. We've had robust tourism in the past. Mr.
mm,
Modi did not create it. Um, uh, the the numbers are uh, look extremely good is because the pilgrims have now been added to tourism. So earlier we used to count pilgrims and tourists as separate.
mm,
So
mm,
it sounds more magnificent, but we've had this kind of tourism earlier in between 2010 and 2013. Um, but okay, despite that, there are people who are connected with the tourism industry.
mm,
Many of them are, of course, benefiting,
mm,
at least financially. So there would be people who do benefit. If medical colleges are opening, if IIT has opened,
yeah.
and in Jammu. It's good for the students, the local students who can get into these colleges. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. I heard you on a conversation on Satya, I think, and you spoke about the fact that there is a lens of ultranationalism that not just the BJP, but even other parties, academics, media, and the rest of India takes when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. What did you really mean by that?
Jammu and Kashmir is the only Muslim majority, I would say, region today. It's not
Yeah,
even a
you
state,
can't
but
use
it
the
used to
word
be the
state.
only.
Yeah.
It's difficult to kind of um, navigate that. But this was the only Muslim majority state in India.
Mm,
And it was a state that had acceded to India under very unique circumstances. It had a state which had a conflict breathing in it.
mm,
There was also armed insurgency. So within the Indian mainstream, there was a tendency to look at Kashmir only from the security lens.
mm,
That this is a place, this is a territory that needs to be protected, and what is the priority, where the priority were not the people, it was the territorial integrity of the state, for which all and every kind of narrative that was local was viewed with skepticism. So even when I said, you talked about media projections these days, only being about Modi centric, Modi government centric, or narratives that are in line with the Modi government. Um, Apart from the fact that these are the only voices that are being heard through media projection. Apart from that, there is a tendency also among the common men, it's not just that what they are seeing. It's also when they think of Kashmir, what do they think of? When they think of Kashmir as a territory, maybe it might be something different. Maybe they think of landscape, maybe they think of the map. But when they think of a Kashmiri, they
Hmm.
think very differently. They think of a Kashmiri as the other.
Hmm. And this happens even when Kashmiris, we have so many instances in the past, especially, isn't it, of Kashmiri students when they came into different states in India and how they might have been treated, isn't it? Uh,
Yeah, it used to happen earlier as well. Now it's happening much more. A mere complaint by any other student would be enough to jail a Kashmiri student.
mm,
And so we've seen these kind of um, ways in which and
mm,
it's not just happening to Kashmiris. Look at the Kashmir template is extending to rest of India. It's
mm.
happening to Indian Muslims who have, who are not even politically motivated by some separatist ideology.
There are fears, and you have also articulated fears to discount about how, as a result of this, now we've already had 4.5 years of this change to JNK, and going forward now with the Supreme Court validating the Indian government's decision, you will see you have expressed fears that there will be even more active efforts to have investment into the state, other people, and I mean other Indians, people from other states coming in to settle in Jammu and Kashmir, and therefore fears that the demography, this Muslim majority population, especially in Kashmir, will might get affected. How do you see this play out, given the experience of the past 4.5 years? And what are the inherent dangers there that you see for people, local people?
Um, it's no longer just a danger for Kashmiri Muslims or other Muslims of Jammu and Kashmir. Even Hindus in
Mm,
Jammu region are resenting
mm,
that people from outside are coming, and they will the locals will not be able to compete with them in terms of jobs, in terms of admissions to higher educational institutions. Local businesses are not doing well as of now. So there is a lot of resentment. Now, how many look, a lot of these business contracts and mining contracts, they are coming from outside. And that is also taking a toll of the ecology of the place, because the contractors that are now engaged in mining are no longer, mining with smaller machinery or
mm,
doing manual work.
mm.
They are bringing more sophisticated machinery, more money is involved. So obviously they're going to extract their pound of flesh. So it's being done at a cost of, the ecology of the place. Whether there is a change already in, the way people are from outside are settling in Jammu and Kashmir, it is very difficult to know, because earlier we had permanent resident certificates. Now, permanent resident certificates don't mean anything. They have been replaced by domicile certificates, which will also include not just, the previous residents of Jammu and Kashmir. It includes certain categories,
Mm.
which gives benefits to people who've stayed in Jammu and Kashmir from anything between 2 to 10 years. And that could mean a lot of people could benefit from that. But how many have actually got their domicile certificates? It's difficult to note. We've seen, about 20 million domicile certificates made in the last 4 years, but there's no way to find out how many of these are conversions from the original permanent resident certificates to domicile certificates, and how many other new applications.
Mm,
But in
mm,
due course of time, of course, there are fears. When you start offering, people can invest, people can buy land, people can construct hotels, people can get jobs.
I
They,
think,
they, there would be there
but
would be an
this,
influx, and there are greater worries even in Jammu region, I would say. Why? Because Jammu is culturally, geographically more linked to northern India, and it's more peaceful area. I mean, why would anybody go to Kashmir to settle,
mm,
which is kind
mm,
of, you don't even know whether it's going to be
mm,
if it's going to be volatile or not
mm,
for a long period of time. And going there visiting is different than living there. So it may change. There are worries.
mm.
There were always anxieties, in fact, among Kashmiris that um, BJP would try an attempt to change the demography of Jammu and Kashmir, because that was also their political plank for many years.
Yes.
The RSS has been talking about it. The BJP leaders have been talking about it for years.
You're a Kashmiri. You have seen as a journalist, but also as a permanent resident of the state, up close, the politics play out, society evolve over the last few decades. What have all these changes, especially the last set of changes as of 2019, meant for you as a journalist and as a Kashmiri, with specific reference to Kashmir Times and doing what you do as a profession?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll count myself as Kashmiri. I don't know where I belong because I'm not an ethnic Kashmiri.
I know.
But
That's
I've spent so much of my life there
yeah, yeah.
that, yeah, there is, Kashmir is a very complex word and it can be interchangeably used for different things. So my political identity would be Kashmiri. If we use Kashmir as an abbreviation for Jammu and Kashmir, probably, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, how do I feel? I think professionally, personally, and as a citizen, it has had a deep impact
And they combine,
on me.
isn't it? Professional,
They
personal are
Yeah,
combined for you.
of course they are. I mean, your profession is so much linked to your personal life and your personal ideas and your ideologies, and they do impact. But professionally, of course, I've been impacted. I mean, of course, first we had the internet shut down, and then we've had this,
Which you
cycle,
petitioned
vicious cycle
against.
of
Yeah.
repression going on one after the other. Our office, Kashmir Times, was sealed in Srinagar. In and gradually, financially, because the advertisement support was withdrawn the day I went to court. So financially, we were badly hit.
Hmm.
And the newspaper, which started in 1954, I mean, we are unable to publish any of the editions today. We had to shut down the Srinagar edition, we had to shut down Dogri and Hindi editions. And we did continue with the Jammu English edition for quite some time, but I don't think it would be possible anymore. But so that's impacted us. As a citizen, you feel humiliated. You
Hmm.
feel humiliated and you feel angry because there's a decision taken about your region without your consultation, without taking the people into confidence, by laying a siege around them, creating curfew-like conditions. You snap off the communication channels, you snap off internet, and there were like curfew-like restrictions on the roads. Even in Jammu city, I was in Jammu. Section 14, imposition of Section 144.
Hmm.
Nobody can, have the freedom to say anything. And your decision has been taken, not just your autonomy that you enjoyed. I mean, for any buddy from any other part of India, they might feel, okay, yeah, why should they have extra privileges? Why should we give up our extra privileges without being told or without being consulted, in fact, by imprisoning us.
Mm.
For us, it's a setback.
Mm.
Why should we be demoted from a state, dismembered and turned into two union territories as if we mean nothing? So it's very humiliating. It,
Mm.
yeah, it erodes your faith in Indian democracy, and that's a very sad feeling. Um, so personally, I mean, anything that applies to any person of Jammu and Kashmir today, it applies to me as well. Um, Say my, how the new land laws are going to impact me, how the new systems of hiking electricity tariff, or
Mm.
introducing property tax. All of these things are going to impact me as a local person. In terms of, how my, so that's, I'll be impacted as much as any other.
Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
And I wish you a lot of good luck and looking forward to more conversations as things change and we need to assess what's going on. Thank you, Anuradha. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Ham. Pleasure talking.